Hi, welcome to the 9th month of the Stellar Stars block of the month. This month we are going to be making this beautiful block here called Astral Plane. It is one of my favorites and I really hope that you are going to enjoy making it as well. This month we'll be focusing on foundation paper piecing once again and really taking your skills even further than we have before. So all of the blocks leading up to this one, Mississippi Star, Moss Star, and Lotus Star, and I think, is that it for our foundation pieced ones thus far? Everything you've learned in those is going to help you make this block, plus you'll learn additional skills for joining multiple units. So in the previous blocks, we were basically making half square triangles and then joining them to make a one block and then joining 4 of those to make a full block. This is done with 60-degree angles, which that term 60-degree triangle, 60-degree angle can be a little bit scary for quilters, especially when you're just starting out. But I'm really hoping to help you make this simpler. It is pieced together with no Y seams at all, which is really fantastic, and done in units. So let's walk through the block and its units to help you become a little familiar with it. So we've got the center star, the blue pieces here, and each section is 1 unit, and that is unit A. Next, we go out to the outer units. So each one of these are A's, so there are 6 total. And this block is pieced together in 2 halves. So we've got 1 half here, and then the other half on the other side. And over here is unit B, and up here is unit C. A, B, and C are all pieced together to make one larger unit. And then here in the middle, on the side, is piece A again, and then we have D and E. And D and E are mirror images of each other, but they do need to be pieced in the right orientation to get these stars to match up. And then down here in this corner, we have piece A again, and then we have F and G. So these make up a unit, A, F, G, A, D, E, and A, B, C. You'll make 2 halves that are exactly the same, and then to piece the entire block together, you'll rotate 1 half around, and then they'll join together to make the full block. I can't wait to see what you make with it and the colors you choose. In the pattern this month, I put in a few color options. If you get the subscription bundles, this is what it looks like this month. You'll get your background fabric, the blues that we'll be using, and then the accent color. This month, my mom, Sharon, she dyed a whole extra color for you guys, kind of on accident, but it ends up being a bonus. So there are 6 blues to choose from, plus the accent color, which is a fat 1/8, and that's more than enough for the block. For your color options, you can use any of the 6 and mix it up if you would like. There are 5 colors total, so if you start here in the middle, that's color number 5. This little one is number 4, this is 3, this is 2, and out here is number 1. You could also go 6, 5, 4, 3, and 2, or mix it up, just kind of depending on your own preferences. In addition to the fabrics, if you are getting our thread bundle, these are all the gorgeous threads that are in the bundle this month. The first one, and this is the one I'm going to use for piecing, is the Soie Surfine 2480. It's amazing for piecing. Please, please give it a try. If you haven't used the Surfine for any of your block piecing yet, you may never go back to piecing with anything else. It is absolutely wonderful. It's a nice light blue, so it is neutral enough to use throughout the entire block. We also have in the thread bundle embroidery floss, the Soie 103, which is great for machine piecing. It's not as nice as the surfing. It's a little bit heavier, but it's still really nice. It's also great for machine embroidery and hand embroidery. We have 2 spools of the perlé, and that's also wonderful to use for machine work and hand embroidery. And then 1 more spool of the 103 in a brighter blue, plus the skein of Dalgé, which is a 7-strand floss. So these fabrics are really ideal for a star like this to give it the gradient throughout the block. And I think you're going to really enjoy playing with the colors and even doing and I think you're okay. Let's just delete out that part. I hope you really enjoy using these amazing blues this month. They are just stunning. There's a little hint of purple throughout, which makes them just amazing and wonderful, and I can't say enough good things about them. Let's get into the pattern a little bit and what you can expect to find there. So the pattern is available now, and I walk you through everything step by step for putting the whole block together. And it includes all of the templates you're going to need as well, the cutting templates and the piecing templates. Make sure you read through the pattern before you get started. One new thing that I included for you that I want to point out, well, here's all the color options, and of course there's many more that can be created as well. Then after those additional color options, I included something new. I put in a block and unit diagram to help you keep track and stay oriented with the blocks that you're making and where they go. So you can see how I put in where unit A is, and remember all of these are also unit A, and then B, C, D, E, F, and G. So this can just be a tool for you to help you keep track as you're going, especially because there's a lot of rights and lefts. So if you take a look at B and F, they are rights and lefts. D and E are rights and lefts, and C and G are rights and lefts. And I'm hoping that this will help you just to stay organized and oriented with what goes where and how it will come together for the block. This is shown from the front. I made it look a little lighter just so I could highlight these frames around the units, but this is from the front. From the back it would be reversed, so B would be on this side. And then the rest of the instructions just walk you through everything you need for making your block. Now I've also given you the cutting templates, and those you can just print on regular paper, and the piecing templates. Now there are 3 pages of piecing templates, so stay aware of that, and you will need to print 2 of each piecing template page. That is written on the template instructions, but just saying it now that you do need 2 of each of those 3 pages. Well, let's just jump right in real quick. What I am going to do is just get right to the sewing and the piecing. Everything about preparing the fabric is exactly the same as the other foundation piecing blocks. I'm going to just jump right in so we can get going, and I can be most helpful to you in getting the actual block constructed, because there are a few little things that are unique, specifically when it comes to intersecting seams. We clearly have a big intersecting seam here. These will all nest and spin. And then here on each piece also have intersecting seams. So I'm going to show you with this block how you can nest and spin additional seams in a foundation piece block, which isn't very common, but it's absolutely possible. Sometimes it takes a little bit of thinking, but for this block I did the thinking for you, and it's all in the instructions, and I'll walk you through it on the video. So on the back you can see here the center spins, and then as we go through I'll show you how all of these spin and the directions that we press them to make that happen. Next up I will have all of the fabric templates ready to sew, and and we will get our units pieced together and ready to make this amazing block. I've gotten all of the pieces cut using the cutting templates. So let's take a look at one of these. I listed how many to cut and from what color. And of course you can change the color, and if you do, you can write it on the template what color it's going to be, or glue a little snippet of fabric to it with your little glue stick. So I have all of the blues cut out for the center, so that is all of my 8s, 1A, 2, 3, all the way to 8. All of my B's and C's and D's, E's, F's, and G's are all cut, and using the cutting templates with my fabrics there. I want to make note that on some of the templates you're going to see an arrow indicating grain line. And the most important place for you to pay attention to grain lines are going to be the pieces. Let's take a quick look at the block again. Are going to be the pieces that are on the outside of the block. Those are framing your block, keeping everything square, secure. It will resist shifting, it will resist stretching. So it's really important that all of these pieces, your background pieces for this specific block, are cut on grain to keep the straight grain on the straight of your block. Now, all of the pieces in the middles, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. For the pieces, the number 2 pieces, the pink ones here, I did put a grain line on the piece, but if you don't use it, it's not the end of the world. It's mostly essential for those pieces. And then on the blue pieces, I didn't put an arrow at all, because they rotate so much all the way around. It would be far too much trouble than it's worth to make sure every single one of these is on grain, especially since they are sewn so securely together and then stabilized by these outside units. So that's why the arrows are on some of them and are not on others. So you can see here, I did not put any arrows on the A template pieces, but there are arrows on the rest to help you out. The first thing I'm going to do is get my piecing templates ready to go. I'm going to rough cut them out of the printed foundation. I'm using the lightweight foundation that I carry in my shop, but you can certainly use any of your favorite papers for foundation / paper piecing. There are quite a few different products out there, from using printer paper to specialized foundation piecing paper to using this. The nice thing about this is it does not have to come out. It can stay in your piece. In addition, one of my favorite things is when you are tearing it out of the seam allowance, like in here, it does a little bit of feathering, so these pieces don't pop up like paper will. Paper will kind of pop up and then it gets really loose. This kind of stays secure, and which helps maintain the stability of the block, which is what makes it easy to piece to other units and such that are not foundation piece. So we'll get into that more later though. Print your foundation piecing templates, or paper piecing, kind of go back and forth with the term, and then we'll be ready to piece them together. Several of the units B, C, D, E, and F, so B, C, D, E, and F, all are only 2 pieces of fabric sewn together on one line. Super, super, super easy. What I do want you to note is inside the seam allowances, I mark and indicate what gets joined to which side, and there's a dot, and that dot is really important for the sewing process, because those dots indicate where a seam will be spun, so you can start or stop your sewing there. Let's take a look at all of the supplies that we are going to need for paper piecing. Again, it's very similar, if not exactly the same as the past blocks, but in case you haven't watched the others and you're just catching this, we'll go over it real quick. we're going to use a Elmer's washable school glue stick to baste the very first piece onto our foundation templates. And then that just kind of keeps it tacked in place. We don't heat set that, especially if you're using paper. Heat setting it will make it stick a little bit too much and can rip the paper and leave paper residue on your fabric. So we won't heat set that part. We are also going to use the Elmer's washable school glue with the microfine tip, and we are going to glue baste our foundation piecing pieces together to help stabilize them, which helps keep the grain lines and any bias grains from stretching as you're piecing. It also helps with accuracy, so you don't get shifting at the machine, and it makes it a lot easier to do chain pieced foundation piecing. When we're glue basting and everything, each piece is secured to the piece it's being sewn to, then it makes everything go a little bit quicker, a little bit more efficient, without worry that you are going to have your piece move out of place or shift under the machine. You'll also need a ruler. You can just use a regular rotary ruler or an add a quarter ruler. This adds a quarter, has a little ledge, so it helps you add just a 1/4 inch, which is really important for trimming the seams on foundation piecing. So to get started, we're going to do one of the templates here. I like to prep all of the templates that are the same at once. It's quick and easy for me, but it's completely up to you. If this is your first time foundation piecing, then definitely do one unit at a time until you get more comfortable. So I'm going to take my glue stick and just put a little dab of glue right in the space for 1A. You can kind of see here that it's right inside of that area, and we're working on the back side because we're going to sew on the front side. So on the back side, take piece 1 and right side up. So if you're using a print, it's really important to go right side up. If you're using hand dyes or solids, it doesn't matter too much. I'm going to center that, and what I like to do while it's tacked on is from the front side, just kind of make sure that the fabric shadows all the way around, so you can see that it's going past the seam line and going past the seam allowance lines on the sides. And then for piece 2, I'm going to fold up this edge of 1 and give a little finger crease right along that seam line between 1 and 2. Now that gives me a crease right here that tells me that that's just about the place that the seam line is going to happen. So that gives me a place to start for placing my glue. I'm going to draw a little line of glue just to the outside of that line toward the selvage. Get my piece 2 and right sides together, just line up those edges. And that I am going to heat set. Trying to be careful to not get that glue stick part set. And now this is ready to sew, and you can tell it's not going to shift. These pieces are stuck together, and it is going to help a lot at the machine for sewing. I will prep all 6 of mine like this and then sew the seam, and then next we'll be trimming those seams. B through G will do the exact same process that we just did, but as I mentioned, it only has the 1 seam, so you only have to do that 1 time. So on the back side, just put a little dab of glue where piece number 1 goes. Get your fabric piece. Now this shape is a little different than most shapes. On the fabric, it can kind of look like it doesn't matter which orientation the fabric is in, and really it's not a huge difference, but you can tell that one end here is narrower than the other. This one's longer, this one's narrower. The narrow edge of fabric will go and align with that narrow edge, and then you can just kind of get them to stick together and fold up where piece 2 will go, make that crease, Do your fine line of glue. I know it doesn't show up too great on white. Get your piece B. And what I want you to make sure you do, because triangles can be tricky. It can feel like a triangle is correctly placed. If you do this, it can feel, oh yeah, that covers, but really it's not. Especially if you're using hand dyes or solids. So just kind of eyeball where it goes, then flip it over and line up your edges. I made the cutting template so that the edge, that cut edge of the triangle, will align with the edge of your background fabric to help with placement, accuracy, and then heat set that and it's ready to sew. The rest of the pieces with the background fabric, B, C, D, E, F, and G, are done just like this, sewn, trimmed, and then they'll be ready to piece into your block. The first seams are sewn for both Unit A and Unit B. Everything that I'm going to show you for Unit B is exactly what needs to be done for Unit C, D, E, F, and G. Then I will walk you through adding each additional piece to Unit A and helping you through some little tips and tricks to make this work really easily for you. So the first things we need to do for both is to trim our seam allowances. So just like with all of the others, we'll put it with the foundation side up. We'll fold back the foundation at piece 2 to expose the seam allowance, and then we'll just trim that down to 1/4 inch. And I'll just line up the edge of that foundation knot with my ruler and give it a trim. And now that one is ready to press. And same thing here with Unit A. We'll fold back, actually at also at Unit 2, sorry, I had to flip that over. At piece number 2, we'll turn it back at piece number 2, or fold it back. So it'll look a little bit like that, and we will trim that down to 1/4 inch as well. Now they are both ready for pressing. For pressing both, we're going to set our seam, and I have some wrinkles over here, so I'll just press those out of it. From the front, pull over piece number 2B, and this is the same for all of the piece number 2s, and fold it over so you can press that to the side, and now this is ready to trim. For Unit A, we will set that seam, fold back piece number 2 in its place, and then it's ready for piece number 3. Before moving on to piece A, I'm going to walk you through trimming Unit B, and then you'll be familiar and comfortable with what to do with all of the B, C, D, E, F, and G units. So to trim off this unit, we will, okay, first of all, I have full disclosure. I clearly wasn't paying very good attention. So can you see that? I'm just trying to get it in a good light for you. I wasn't paying very good attention to where my fabric folded over to, and my fabric here for piece number 2 is extremely short. It is too short for piecing with it. So I am going to have to take out this seam and re-sew it. So I'll trim up these edges, and then trimming up the other 2 sides is exactly the same. I do want to point out the little dot here that indicates a seam that will have an intersection and can spin, so that's a stop and or a starting point. So let's just hop right into trimming this, and then I'll fix my little error, fix that fabric so it will fit in the spot and be big enough. So when I'm trimming, I know I did that one pretty quick, but I'm aligning this 1/4 inch line, or any 1/4 inch line you have, or on your ruler, along the solid line. So it's adding a 1/4 inch from the solid line, which is the seam line, to the outside edge of the template, which should be where your where your seam allowance would be. And then I'll just keep rotating it around until I get all of the sides trimmed up. And I'll skip those other 2 just so I can fix that other piece and make it work better. And then the other 2 sides will do exactly the same. By the magic of video, this is what it will look like when it's complete. So you'll have all your edges trimmed, and from the front it'll look fantastic and ready to piece into your block. So your other pieces will look like this. Here are C and F, I believe. No, C and G. So there's G and here's C. So you can see the rights and lefts of one another. So C and G. And then we have D and E as well. So all of your pieces will look a little bit like this. You can see the rights and lefts of each other. And then we've got our piece F's. Yep, this is the F. So this is the opposite of Unit A. And so once you get all of those done and trimmed, and then you can finish working on your Unit A's. I kind of like doing all of these at first. They're simple because they only have one seam. I can get them all trimmed, and then I just focus on Unit A. It's up to you which way you want to go, but that's just what I did for this one. All right, so let's get back to Unit A. Let's take a look at the template from the printed side. You can see next is 3. 3 attaches to number 2, and then after that will be 4. You can see this connected band, so to speak, a diamond shape. That's going to be the same color, and for here 5 and 6 will be the same color, and 7, 8 will be the same color. For this, you can change it to any colors you'd like. But that's just the way I have it planned, and it helps me keep track as well, because pieces 4A and 5A are the same shape. They're rights and lefts of each other, and 6A and 7A are also the same exact shape, but they're rights and lefts of each other. So keeping track of what color goes where can help you, just in case you accidentally mix up 5 and 4. Especially using hand dyes or solids. If you're using a print, you probably won't get it mixed up because they are rights and lefts. You'll probably catch it pretty quick if you accidentally use one for the other. So on the fabric side, we're going to fold back to make a crease. Fold back along this line connecting 3A and 2A, and that just gives us that crease to tell us where to draw the glue so we can put on our piece number 3A here. So I'm going to put the glue on there, and then with right sides together, I'm going to align my piece, and it's really important on these pieces to double check their placement because they are at 30-degree angles. And it's really easy to want to place the fabric like this because it matches up so nicely. But if you did that and then sewed it and pressed it, you can see how it would not fit properly. So it's important to make sure that you are placing your fabric in its appropriate spot, but also double checking by folding it over. So in the instructions I say to gently fold it over to check placement. This is what I mean by that. Just to check placement and do it from the front and back to make sure that your fabric extends past the seam allowance here and past these lines. Now this is a little close for comfort for me. So from the front side, I'm going to just scooch it down just a smidge and then double check it again, and that fits much better. It goes beyond all the lines. So I like that better. I'll put that back in its spot, heat set it, and now it's ready to sew, and I'll repeat that for all 6 of the A units. And when I sew this piece, I'm going to go right along this line here. Now we have an intersecting point right here that you can either start or stop at, do a little back stitch, and then continue past the seam allowance here, or you can sew into piece 4A. The pros of starting or stopping here at the intersection is when you go to add 4A, you won't have any of this paper or foundation having to rip to make room for that seam. The con of starting or stopping at the intersection is it does take a couple extra seconds to find your position and then do a little back stitch. Either way, you get the job done and your piece will be in the right spot. It'll be sewn, it'll be just fine. But just so you know, you have either option. I do like to start or stop here, but I don't always. Sometimes when I'm just sewing, I forget to. But when I'm being intentional, I will start or stop at that little intersection. So next you'll see the sewn, and we'll trim and we'll add on piece number 4. You can see the seam has been sewn. Let me get it nice and close for you. I did start sewing at that little intersection. Even with my seam allowance to the left, I started there, because with paper piecing or foundation piecing, it doesn't matter really if your seam allowance is to the right or to the left, because everything is stabilized to the paper. So I started here, back stitched a couple stitches, and then came straight down and passed and into my seam allowance. So now we're ready to trim this up. So I'll fold back my foundation, and here where your thread, where your stitch goes into the seam allowance from joining 1 and 2, you will need to pull that back a bit, whether you undo a few stitches or rip your foundation. Doesn't matter, it gets the job done. You just need to make sure you can get it back to the seam so you can get a 1/4 inch seam allowance cut, and then we'll go ahead and press that. So from the fabric side, let's go ahead and set the seam. Take your piece, take it over to the side, and then press it nice and flat. And again, from the back side, you can see how the fabric goes beyond all of the seam lines, including the seam allowance on the side. Next, we'll add 4A. So on that 4A side, we'll just fold that up, make a crease. I'm going to, you know what, before I put on the glue, I want to show you how this piece will set in. So with right sides up, making sure to align your fabric, kind of first just set it in place so it's centered and all of the edges of the fabric go beyond the seam lines and the seam allowances. So you can kind of see that from the back side. That's its position, not sewn. Okay, so from this position, I'm going to flip it over and try and kind of keep it in the same orientation, if that makes any sense. And then holding it up, this is just another little strategy. I'm going to draw the line of glue there and then just tap it in place, and then gently fold that top fabric over till that crease is shown, from that fold. And then before heat setting it, just flip it on over and make sure your fabric goes beyond all of the seam lines and the seam allowance, and I can see that it does, so I'm happy with that positioning. And then heat set, and then we'll sew that seam. Repeat to get all of the other seams sewn. So I'll be right back with that seam sewn, and we'll trim and press and do the next piece. That seam is now sewn. You can take a look and see how I've started and back stitched right there at the intersection and just came straight down. And I am sewing all of the seams with the Surfine, the Soie Surfine number 2480. That's in the thread set. I just love piecing with the silk thread, and if you haven't tried it yet, please give it a try. Also, just a side note, I want you to take a look at how these two seams intersected right off of this point. That's just a good visual to help you make sure that your seams are in the right places. So let's trim that back. Go ahead and fold. Now, that previous seam line, I'm gonna have to pull back my foundation a bit. It's okay if it makes a hole in it, no big deal. And then line it up at the 1/4 inch and trim, and now it's ready to press and add the next piece on. Okay, let's set that seam and press this to the side again, and you can see it's starting to really come together. All right, next we will do our piece number 5 right here. We're gonna fold that up, make that crease, and then we'll take piece number 5, and like we did with piece number 4, we want to kind of position it in its place just to help you with positioning of these angular pieces. and just help to make sure that it goes beyond all of the seam lines and the seam allowance, which it does. And then kind of right in its same spot, I'm going to flip it over and try and keep it oriented the same, and then hold back that edge. Again, this is just another strategy. It's good to have strategies for different types of pieces when you're paper piecing that you can dip into and use when you need them. Not every strategy is going to be used every single time, but just having an arsenal of them really helps you as you are doing all different types of designs. So heat set that. This seam is ready to sew, and I'll be right back with that. You can see here seam 5 is now sewn, and we'll go ahead and flip it over, fold back that template, and then trim our seam allowance. And now it's ready to press and add the next piece. This is a lot of back and forth, so at your pressing or workstation, one of my biggest pieces of advice is to have it set up where you can have cutting on one side and pressing on another. For example, my iron, just where it has to be plugged in, is over here on my right. It's kind of inconvenient to have it on the left-hand side, plus I'm a righty. So I keep my iron over on the right in general, and that's where my pressing surface tends to be, is over here on the right-hand side. And then over on my left is my cutting space. So I'll cut over here on the left, then just move it right over to the right to my pressing area, and that helps me keep in a flow and in a rhythm when I'm working, so I don't have to place a cutting mat and remove it in order to do pressing. So it's really helpful if you can set up your area that way, even if you have to use a smaller cutting mat for these small trims and a smaller pressing surface. The pressing surface that I generally use is about 14 inches by 19 inches, and then I'll use the cutting mat next to it. I'll even set my pressing surface right on top. See, that's what I'm kind of doing here. So my pressing surface is right on top of my mat, and it's thick enough that heat's not going through to distort my cutting mat. So it works out really, really well. Otherwise, just have them sitting right next to each other, and I think you'll really enjoy having a nice workspace flow that way. All right, so let's press that over to the side. You can see how these edges are starting to kind of align, which is good. That's a visual clue that you are getting a good placement of your fabric pieces. So let's go to piece number 6 from the fabric side. We're going to fold up the template to the line that joins 6 to 5 and 4, and that gives us that crease. And we'll grab our piece number 6, and it's going to go in here just like that. So what I'm going to do is do that flip over, just kind of keep it oriented, and what I'm also going to do is just check from the back that it goes beyond all of those seam lines and the seam allowance. And then flip it over, try and keep it oriented the same way, and draw your fine line of glue there, which always goes toward the seam allowance away from that fold, which you can see pretty well right there. Let that lay down, double check it that it didn't shift, and heat set it. And then we'll sew that seam, and then we'll add our last 2 pieces. It's sewn and ready to trim, so with the template side up, we'll fold back. So what's happening now, when I fold it back, it's getting a lot easier. I don't have those seams to have to rip the foundation out of, because I started or stopped at that intersection. So it makes it go a little bit quicker at this point too. You make up a little bit of time because you don't have to do any ripping or pulling out here. So add your 1/4 inch, trim it out. And then from the fabric side, set your seam. Setting your seam on these angled pieces is going to help so much with preventing any puckers along the seam line. I can't say that it'll keep them away completely, but it sure helps a lot. Piece number 7 is next. Let's fold that up, make the crease, draw on our glue, and then the piece is going to go around in here, just about like that. So I'm going to flip it on over, and you can do that alignment trick I showed you as well, and we'll gently fold it back just to make sure that it is going to go beyond the seam lines and the seam allowances, and it sure will. So I'm happy with that placement. Heat set it, and then we'll sew that, and then we'll add our very last piece. Seam number 7 is all done. Let's trim that up, fold that foundation back, expose the seam allowance, and then trim it, and we'll set the seam, fold it on back, and press it in place. One more. And then this pretty little guy is all done. It kind of reminds me, when it's all by itself, it reminds me of a peacock feather. So I'm sure there'd be a fun way to use these units in an alternate setting of the block. But I think it is just so pretty just all by itself. So set that in there with the glue, and then this piece will just fit right in here like that. So we'll flip it on over, just double check its placement, fold it back gently, just up to that folded edge, and you can see that the fabric goes beyond all the lines. And heat set it, and we're ready to sew this last seam. This last seam goes from end to end right through the seam allowances. No back stitching, stopping or starting necessary. And then we'll trim it, press it, and then trim all of the edges so it's ready to piece into our block. Last seam is sewn. Let's turn it back and trim it down. So set your seam first, set it on there, and then bring it on over, and now it is complete. You'll do the same thing for all 6 of the A units, and then they'll be ready to trim. For trimming this little guy, we'll have the template side up, and we are going to align the 1/4 inch right along the solid line. Remember, these dots indicate a intersecting seam, so you can, when you start joining these to the rest of the pieces in the block, you can start or stop your seams here, and that will allow your seams to spin at the intersections. So we'll just align our ruler right along that seam line at the 1/4 inch, adding a 1/4 inch to go to the dashed line. And we'll do that for all 4 sides. Alright, once you have all 6 of your Unit A's sewn and trimmed, and all of your Units B, C, D, E, F, and G sewn and trimmed, we'll start assembling the block, which is what we'll be doing next.